Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear, and today we're going to learn how to do some general maintenance on your paintball markers. Okay, so we're going to do maintenance today on a Geo CS1. This is a request from a customer to go through this one. Now all this information will pertain to a CS 1.5 as well, so anything that we do through here will translate over to the other gun as well. So let's get the barrel out of the way, because we really don't need to focus on that. Just move it over. The feed neck, there's not much going on with the feed neck that we talk about. It just comes apart super simple. If you do need to get it off of the gun, maybe we should do that. And I'll show you how to get it off of there. Because a lot of them don't just pull off of there. Sometimes you can find one that will just pop right off. But it won't usually just come right off. So what I like to do is loosen up the top, so that this has got some play to it up here. That'll just loosen up the whole feed neck. You can rotate around freely on the top right here. And we can try to pull it off. It doesn't look like it's gonna go. So what I would do with this one, make sure you have a flathead screwdriver that has no abrasions on it, no grip to the actual flathead section. You want it to be smooth and flat. And we can put it in between this right there. Let's see it from that side actually. I'm just sliding it in between the two pieces. You can take like a post-it and put it in there, something that'll protect it if you don't have a screwdriver that's nice and smooth. And then we're just gonna kind of walk it. As I put it in there, I'm just gonna kind of rotate it back and forth, side to side, just like that. And at the same time, I'm gonna push with my thumb from the bottom. And eventually it'll just pop right off. I'm pushing with my thumb under, pushing up, and at the same time wiggling the screwdriver back and forth to just give it that little bit of space to get the feed neck off the gun. Sometimes you can just pop them right off. You can just pull on it, it'll come right off. When I put it back on, we're just gonna push it back down and it will seat back down. But getting it off can be a little bit harder. Let's get the grips off. So the front grip just pulls off over there. The back grip is going to require us to take some screws out. So there's two panel screws, and then there's also one console screw. So we got those two, and then there's one right back there as well. Get that out of there. Then we can take the front grips off. There's a little tab right here. We just grab it, lift it up. And then the back one, I like to grab the back from the top on both sides, and I will spread it out like that. You can see it's kind of pulled apart. Then I'll go down to the bottom and do that. And then you can just pull it right off there. Make sure you unhook these little circles first too. All right, so here we are. We've got the gun apart. Now there's two differences that you'll see between a CS 1.5, or a difference, I would say two, there's a lot of differences, but a major difference between the frame setups on a 1.5 and a 1. You can see this one right here, the battery holder, the top of it right here has a hole in it. Now on the later model CS1s and all CS 1.5s, there will be a pin right here, and this pin goes through the actual body and it's held in on the other side right here. So it's just a steel bar that goes through there. It gives it a little extra support. You can see that this battery housing was made after they started doing that, but this body wasn't drilled for that hole. So this has the new style battery case, but it doesn't have the hole in there, so you don't see any pin in it. But if you do see a pin in there, you just punch it out. You can take it out either way. It's easy to pull it out of there. So let's take the bolt out from there. We need the bolt out to remove the frames. Frames, like there's two. To remove the frame, so there's a rear frame screw, which is back there. See it right in there. And then we have a front frame screw, which is underneath here. separate the two apart. Now let's just finish this up here at the front. From here, maintenance-wise, really what you're going to be doing for the most part is taking the eye covers off, slide that back, pull the eye cover off, and then we're going to be making sure that the eyes are clean. Now you don't need to remove the frame like I did to clean your eyes. You can do that with just pulling the front cover off. But lift up the eyes, clean them out, clean the socket, so the hole underneath here that the eye actually drops into, right in there. Make sure that's clean. Make sure there's no paint down in there, because if you leave paint in the body itself and you just put the eye back on, well, then you just got more paint in there. So we'll remove the detent out, clean the detents off, make sure that they're not covered in any kind of paint. If they need to be replaced, replace them. Your gun comes with an extra one right down in here. So this detent doesn't serve any function other than as a spare. It's not like a 4 detent system or anything like that. It just is a spare. When we slide this back, we can actually pull it out if you want to. If you needed to clean underneath it, you can see that it's missing now. And then when we put it back in, we just set it down in there like that. You need to do this before, if you want to take this all the way off, the frame needs to be off. You can't pull this off with just taking the front grip off. So let's put that back on there. We'll put our eye cover back on, and that just snaps forward right there. If you want to do solenoid maintenance, you can remove the solenoid off of here. The solenoid comes in a couple parts, so we'll go ahead and pop that off. I'm going to take both eye covers off so that I can get my eyes out. There's a very important rule when it comes to your eyes that we will talk about in just a minute. Now there's 4 screws that hold the solenoid together. There's one here, there's one up here, and then there's 2 back there, those 2. These 2 are longer than these 2, so make sure that you use the same screws in the same spots when you go to put it all back together. Although, no, I'm wrong. Sorry. Take that back. These screws are longer than the ones that hold the trigger on. I knew they were something like that. So you can see the difference between this screw right here, the length of that one, and the length of this one. If you take the gun apart all at the same time, you'll notice that you have 2 different length screws that look the same. The longer ones are for the solenoid. The other ones can go anywhere else. So our solenoid is disconnected there. We will need to remove the communication plate, or I don't know what they call it. They probably call it the upper board. This is what makes contact with the lower board, so that you can have this available system to disconnect the upper and lower parts of the gun without needing to disconnect any wires. So let's get that off of there. We've got those 2 screws. We've got this little plate here which holds this board in the proper orientation. So we'll put that back in later. And then this is just our connector board, and then our solenoid and our manifold right there. So on here, let me put this back on. You've got 2 sets of gaskets right here. There's this one that kind of looks like a candy cane shape right there. And then there's one that's got a couple different holes in it. If you're getting any leaks from the solenoid area, pull those off, look at them. You want to just inspect your solenoid here, your part of your pilot valve up there, and then your actual spool right there. You just want to check all these O-rings. If you're getting solenoid issues, solenoid leaks, pull these out and replace the O-rings on them. Make sure you clean it, re-grease it, and then put it back together. It's a very simple solenoid disassembly. It's meant to be taken apart by the user. This section up here is not rebuildable or anything, but this back section with the spool in it, definitely serviceable by the user. It's meant to be. You've got some pins right here. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pins, and then there's 6 hole locations on the bottom of the solenoid. so that you line everything up when you go to put it back together. And it all corresponds with where it needs to sit, so you don't get those in the wrong spot as well. Now, when we go to put it back together, the wiring needs to line up in a certain area so that it doesn't get crushed. So we're going to do that next. We're going to put this back together and make sure our wires are in the right spot. All right, so next step is to put the solenoid on the manifold, and then I put it in like that. I don't put the manifold in and then try to set the solenoid on top of it. I do it at the same time. So you've got wire here, I wire, and then power wire right here. And they are all connected to the board at the end down here. So we're going to make sure that we have one set of I wires on one side, the other set of I wire on the other side, and then the power wire on one side. So on one side you're going to have power and I, other side you're going to have just I. Now with Planet Eyes, and this goes for all of their guns, you'll see that one side is red and one side is black with the shrink wrap that's on it. The red side always goes on the right side of the body. So when we go to put this together, this is our right side, this is our left side over here. So we want to make sure, right side, if I flip this over, this is our right side over here, that our red I wire goes on the right side. So on the left side, you're going to have our power wire and our black I wire. On the right side, we're going to have our red I wire. So I'm going to make sure all that gets out of the way. I'm going to connect our solenoid to our manifold. Got it backwards. Right there. So we're making sure our gaskets, the top two that we looked at, are good, and then our bottom main manifold to body gasket is along the bottom right here. It's a very long one. I'm going to make sure that that looks okay and is greased. That looks fine. So then we're going to turn it back over. We're going to make sure that none of the wiring is running underneath the solenoid because we don't want to crush it when we go to put it back in. And then we're just going to drop it down into place like that. And then we will go ahead and tighten everything up. Now when you're going to put your solenoid screws in, if it doesn't look like it's going down properly, and it seems like you're not completely able to screw it down, pull everything off and start again, because something probably isn't lined up correctly, and you don't want to damage anything. All right, so now we're going to go around and we're going to give it just a couple more tightens, just a little snug, because as we go around and tighten all the screws, we're just going to need to go back, not overdoing it. All right, so now we can feed our wiring in. So we've got power wire, which you can see is the red and black, and then our I wires. So there's little clips that are a part of the manifold right there. Clip, and there's two on the other side. These will keep our wires tidy. So we're going to go ahead and drop these down in. We're going to snap them on the clips there. Clip. So that has our solenoid wire, power wire sticking down. You want to do that one first before you do the I wire. So solenoid wire first, and then we can do I wire second, and then the I wire will just set into place once you line it up like that. And then we can flip it over and we can do the same thing to the other side. Like that. And then put the eye in place. And the eye should sit flush. This is not sitting flush. I don't know if you can see that this side right here is sticking up. So I would pop this back out real quick and then work it till it went in there. There we go. Much better. All right. Make sure my detents are in place. These extra sets that are down here, they love to pop out of position. they look like, or they feel like they never fit in there right, but you can get them in there. Let's put our retainer clip back in. Our eye cover. Retainer, cover, snap. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put our connector board back in place. You can see that you've got your two connection ports right there. This is going to fit up against them, like that. All right. There's a hole, there's two holes in here. 1 and 2 right there. If you line this up properly with the board, you'll see that the holes, I might not be able to grab that right, line up properly. So they should sit right over the top of each other when it's lined up. And then those holes line up with the holes that are in the bracket here as well. So once we get everything in there, we get our screw and tighten that down. And that one as well. And again, don't over tighten them. Just make sure they're snug. And your wiring should look just like that. Super tidy, super clean. It's not crossing over. It's not really twisted up or anything like that. It's not underneath the solenoid. It's not crushed underneath here. It's a very simple wire design, and it is all held in place. Looks like my eye wire popped out right there. There we go. So that it doesn't move. That way you're not accidentally smashing anything when you go to stick these two pieces back together. All right, so we'll move our body off to the side. Move on to our frame, and then we'll do our bolt last. All right, so the frame consists of a couple different parts. You got the front battery assembly, the wiring runs across to the board, connects to the board. We have our regulator built into the frame. We have our trigger. So we're going to pull everything out. I'm going to pull the wiring, the battery terminal off, the wiring out, the gaskets in here, the wire tidy that's in here. We'll take the trigger out, and then we will take the regulator out. So let's do the upper part of the frame first. I'm going to just pull the battery assembly out. Before I get all the way through this, I'm not going to take all the screws out. I'm going to disconnect it first so that I don't yank on the wiring. So right in here is where our power connection is. So we'll just pop that up right there. Take the rest of our screws out. There. And there. That's going to want to fall away. And if you pull this off here, or once you disconnect that last screw, this will fall off, and your batteries, one of them at least, will always fall out of there. So be careful of that, or realize that. Now we can pull our wire up through the top. Make sure not to get caught on anything. And at this point, we need to remove the wire tidy and the gaskets. So I'm going to pull the gaskets out first. They're down in there. So there's a large one, which looks very similar to the one that is in our ASA to frame connection. This one sits on top of the solenoid. So this one actually fits in this area, and this one sits right above this area when they're connected together on the gun. See that? So we got those out. Now let's get our wire tidy out. It's like a horseshoe that runs around like this. These can be a little tricky every once in a while to get out of here. You want to make sure that you don't damage the wiring in any way. So I don't want to force anything. But they are tight in there, and they're tight for a reason, because they don't want your wiring to get out of the way. So you can see now that the wiring runs underneath there. And this little tidy has a little channel cut along the side, and that's where the wiring sits inside there. So this sits inside the frame like this and keeps those wires pushed to the sides so they don't run along the middle down here and get crushed by the solenoid when you go to put it together. So let's pull the wire out and then we'll move on from there. All right, so we can just lift the wiring up and drop it out. Set it over here to the side. We've got that taken care of. We have our gaskets. We'll keep them together over here as well. You can pop your flow restrictor out if you want to. That just comes out of this side, over there. Now we've got plenty of space to get our trigger out. This is one way to, well, you don't have to go through all these steps to get the trigger out. But if you needed to pull the trigger out, and you could replace the front here if you like that rake design or the flat design that they came out with, you would unscrew from the back right here. And then that just pops right off, and then you can replace this with a different shape. They actually have the CAD files out there for this trigger, and you could 3D print your own shape. If you wanted something that was super crazy or wacky or something that you thought would be super cool, you could print your own and stick it on there. I think that's pretty neat. All right, so that's off. We've got everything out of here, 2 gaskets out, wiring out, trigger out. So that's everything that's along the top right here. If we wanted to pull the board out, 3 screws here, here, and here. And then our board just comes right out. Be careful with that, obviously. You don't want to just be throwing that thing around. That's expensive. All right, so from here we could do our ASA and our regulator. So 2 screws on the bottom. That's going to release the ASA, the pops, as they would call it. Just drop your Allen keys on the ground. There. Nice big screws. There. So let's make some space here. Once those 2 are out, you can just pull this off, and you've got the inside of your regulator. Grab that and pull it out. Now you want to make sure you're very careful with the top of your piston here. I'm using a pair of rounded needle nose, nothing with any kind of serration on it that's going to mark this up. I just grab it like that and I can pull it out. I want to be very careful with the top of this that I don't put any chips or nicks in it or anything like that. Otherwise I'm going to cause damage to the O-rings or reg seat of my regulator and have all sorts of problems. If you have a leaky reg, change the piston O-ring right there. If you have issues with it supercharging or overcharging or being slow to recharge, you want to remove these sections that we're in right now. Oh, by the way, that's all that's left in our frame. There's nothing up in that anymore. Everything's out of it. It's basically just a shell now. So now we can remove this castle right here, and this guy has 2 things in it. This has our adjuster right here. This is our regulator adjuster. This is what you would adjust through the bottom of the gun, through that hole, when you're adjusting velocity right there. Now inside of this is your reg seat. So let's pretend the spring is on this. The face of your piston and the seat right here, they come together, and it causes, it seals like that. So every time you shoot, it goes ding, 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 up and down. And so if this is damaged or your reg seat is damaged, it doesn't seal properly, and you get an overcharging regulator, a leaking regulator. You can get all sorts of problems with that. So make sure that that stays, this stays perfect, and that you check your reg seat every once in a while. Now, if you need to pull your reg seat off, you take your adjuster, your Allen key, or it's a 1/8, I believe, and you put it in there. And then these have flat spots cut into the sides of them. And you can do that, and you can pull this right off. Once this top piece comes off, then you can grab this reg seat, you can pull it out, and then you can replace it with the new rig seat. All right. As far as this piece right here, you've got an O-ring, an O-ring, an O-ring. You can change those out. A critical O-ring that's inside here is actually inside here. It's right at the top of this piece right there. You need a pick to get it out. You will not be able to get it out by hand. It's what seals the top section when the piston goes through it. So the O-ring goes around the piston stem when it slides in there and connects with the reg seat down there. So if you've damaged this, not only will it potentially damage this when it comes together, but as it slides through that O-ring, it'll damage that O-ring as well. So you can damage multiple things by not being careful with the piston at the top. All right, so that's our regulator. It's a pretty simple reg design right there. On the bottom, you have another gasket, and this one has a filter in it. Right there, you can see that there's a beaded filter in the middle. These gaskets, it's going to be really hard to see on this video, I think, but there is a ridge on the gasket itself. Now this ridge is right here, and it is more set to one side than the other. So it is actually closer to this side than it is to this side over here. If you look closely, you'll be able to tell. When you're putting this back onto the ASA, the pocket that this fits in, so this part right here, is deeper than its mating surface, which is right here. When these come back together, like that. All right? So what that means is the ridged surface needs to be in the deeper pocket, and then the non-ridged surface goes into the shallower pocket. So I'm going to look at that. I'm going to find the groove. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to put it in. If we do it right, you shouldn't see the groove on the top. You should just see nice a flat surface up there. So we know we're good to put that back together. Now we'll disassemble the ASA. You're going to push the release all the way in. If you push it once or push it down and slide it forward, it'll snap forward like it does right there. But you need to push it down even further, and that will allow you to pull the front off. Now doing it by finger or whatever, I don't have really long nails, so I really can't do it. So what I do is I take an Allen key and I push it down, and at the same time I slide it forward. Now I'm going to do it this way just because it's easier for me to look at it and do it. Then try to do it backwards like that. Once you get to that point, you can just dump the pin out and the front will fall off. This is our activator rod right here. It does have an O-ring on both sides to keep it centered, so you just push from one side, push it out the other side. It'll fall out, and then our O-ring, you tip it over and your O-ring will come out. This O-ring just sits on here like that when it's assembled and inside the ASA. And then from there, we just pulled the core out. You can unscrew it. And then grab a hold of it, obviously with something that isn't going to damage it, and pop it out. If you have a leaky core, change that O-ring or that O-ring that's on there, and that should solve that. If you have a leak coming from this tiny hole that is on the ASA itself, right there, then you need to change your tank O-ring. That is the bleed for the tank O-ring if it is bad. So, pretty straightforward. Let's put it all back together, put the core in, tighten this down, just give it a little snug, pull the O-ring off the pin, drop it in, flip it over, put it on the other side. Now this one is a little tricky just because it likes to wiggle around, but just be patient. You'll get it on there. Or if your hands are super greasy, like mine are from taking all the parts apart, it'll want to flop around. Put our release pin back through. Make sure that it lines up with the hole and that you can push it up and down. If it does not push through, like that, if you have it off center and it doesn't go in all the way, then you just need to line it up better. Put it on. Maybe if it helps if you put it on there. The new version, the 1.5, you don't need to put this all the way on first. You can just slide it from the beginning and then push down and slide it in. All right, so the ASA is back together, but we need to put the regulator back together. So we are going to take our castle and our reg seat adjuster, and we're going to put them together. Now we're going to screw it back in here. And one thing can happen when you screw these back together. We're actually trying to thread two sections of a piece in at the same time. We have the threading on our adjuster that needs to thread into a lower section, and the threading on the castle, which needs to thread into an upper section. The first part that meets up is the larger threaded section right here. So if we put this in and we start to turn, in that lower section, the threading on the adjuster doesn't line up properly on the inside, it will stop and it will seize, and you will not be able to turn it any further. If that happens, you just go back it up again so it's a little bit loose. Put this in and get a hold of the velocity adjuster, and then screw the velocity adjuster all the way down. So all the way in the increased velocity direction until it stops. So we've screwed it all the way in and bottomed it out. And now we can take this and just thread it in the rest of the way. If you start turning this in and it just stops and there's a gap, do not force it. Get the adjuster in all the way and then go from there. Now, I'm pretty sure according to the manual, for stock settings on the velocity adjuster, it's 4.5 turns, or 4.5 or 5 turns in from completely out. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll go ahead and go to the chronograph and we'll test it. You always want to err on the side of not enough rather than too much, because you can always turn it up without damaging it. But if you're already too high when you start, you already can damage it. So 5 turns in, and then we'll go to the chrono and make sure that it's good. So from there, we'll take our trigger frame, we'll put our piston down in, make sure that it goes all the way to the bottom. If you just drop it in and you don't push on it, it will not go all the way to the bottom. Take our spring, take our ASA, and when we drop or set our ASA down on there, you'll see that there's a gap. I can actually push on that. That's normal. Don't worry about it. When you go and put your screws on and tighten everything down, it'll bring that ASA all the way down and into position and snug up against the frame. I do a couple turns on each side so that we can bring it down evenly. Just like that. All right. So let's go ahead and put everything back together for this real quick, and then we'll move on to our bolt maintenance. I'm just going to run through this kind of fast. So that's our board. In there. We'll do our trigger. Now that our board's in, make sure that your trigger fits around the micro switch right here, that it does not crush the micro switch when it's down in there. If you don't kind of lean it back and let the micro switch fall back, I don't have enough room to show you that, to let it fall back like that, when you drop the trigger down on top of it, you can crush the switch. So just be very careful with that. All right. Okay. Let's run our wiring. that's going to kind of just sit like this for right now. When we go to put this on the front, it'll push it up into the right spot. So now that it's up through there, I'm going to put this on. I don't need to worry about connecting the other side yet. I just want to make sure that I have enough play in this to get everything together. So this actually fits down inside like that. And then we just kind of slide it up on there, and then 4 screws in the top. Like that. Hands are greasy. Like that. Flip it over, and then do the other 2. That. Like that. Then we can take our battery and put it back in. Right there. We can take our wiring and pass it through, and then plug it back in. And since we've already put our trigger in, we're not trying to fight the trigger around the wiring, which you can do. It is possible. So now we're going to make sure that our wiring is separated to both sides. If you're looking at it from the back, so looking at it this way from the back side, usually the red wire is on the right and the black wire is on the left. We're going to drop our wire tidy in. I usually start the side facing away from me, and I kind of come in at an angle like this so that I can get the wire to fit underneath this channel and push it over to the side so that it stays out of the way. Making sure that the black wire is completely underneath the tidy. And then I will bend the other side into place and tuck it in so that it sits along there, and you can see how that works in there. And then the wiring comes up out of the front. Now where the wiring comes up out of the front down here, we want to make sure that we also push this to the side and keep it as far to the side as possible, because our solenoid front right here needs to fit down in between, and we want to make sure that we don't crush any of those wires. So right here, if this wire comes out from underneath the tidy and then just jolts over to the side, you'll want to fix that so that you don't smash it when the solenoid comes through. Put our restrictor back in, and once you've got the tidy in, then you can put your gaskets in. Don't try to put your gaskets in first and then put your tidy in, because it won't be able to fit. There's not enough room to fit it in there. All right, so that's back together. And then hopefully, if it's all good, it snaps right back together just like that. Now if we try to put this front part on and it stays up and out of the way, there's a gap here, you can't get it to come together. That could be because the wiring is in the way of the solenoid at the front. So don't force it, just open it back up, look inside, and do it again. All right, so we're going to put the frame back on, and then we will look at our bolt. Actually, we'll put our feed neck back on too, since we've got it in our hands. Much easier to put it back on than it is to take it off. I like them. The only thing on the guns that I will tighten a good amount is feed necks. You want to make sure that that's nice and snug. You don't want that thing shooting off while you're out there playing. Okay, so let's move over to the bolt. Let's get the cap off the back so we can go all the way through it. So that just pops off of there. This is our locking pin that snaps into the bottom of the gun. You know, this thing pops down and locks in so that it doesn't fall out. This actually also holds the cap together like that. All right. So from here, this is going to unscrew. if you've got bolt issues, bolt leaks, things like that, this is where you're going to look. We'll talk about that. All right, so important O-rings, front one here, the 14x2 back here, 14x2 on the bolt guide. The inside O-ring on here, I think this is a 17, I believe. Those are all super important O-rings here, here, and here. These ones, if you get a leak, are on the outside of the bolt. Check these. But this one here, and this one here, probably your most important O-rings that you want to maintain or keep a watch on. If you do need to get inside this down here, there is your manual shows you how to do it, but I'm going to show you how to do it too. There is a snap ring that's at the bottom down here. Now it is a plastic ring that has a cut in it, or a chunk that is missing out of it, and that is normal. That chunk is supposed to be missing so that you can remove the ring and get the guide out. Don't think that your snap ring is broken or anything like that. If you take it off or you're looking at it and it's missing part of it, that's very, very normal. Once you get it unhooked, which I already have, then you got to kind of get it out of there. So that's our snap ring right there, and you can see that it is missing part of it. Don't worry about it. That's normal. That's so that this can collapse down on itself and become smaller so that you can get it out. Once you pop that out, you can move this out. O-ring here, maintain that one. And then you have this assembly right here. Okay, so this is our locking mechanism that locks the bolt into the gun. But we also have this. This is the part that actually rides inside here when it snaps up and down, so that you have the ability to lock it up, lock it down. So this piece just drops down in the bottom and is held in place by or not held in place. Well, I guess it is held in place. The spring is what pushes it backwards against this piece down here, so that it gives it that snap, so it gives it that the rigidity inside there. So when we go to put it back together, we're just going to drop it down in there. Now there is a tiny little O-ring on here, so if you get a leak out the very back of the gun, check that little O-ring on there, because all it's doing is just sealing up this back here. Woo! I'm going to put this on here and then kind of feed it down in there like that. And see if I push on it. If I didn't push on it, it would just boop, fall right out. And I can do the same thing to get this spring down in there. Kind of feed the spring on your Allen key, and then just drop the spring down into place inside there. Now for this, we would just drop it down in there. Then we need to get the snap ring back in place. So I've got it around the stem already. I kind of get one edge or one little side underneath one of the little slots, and then I just work my way around. And you can kind of push it down as you go, making sure that it all fits in there. There we go. There's 4 little nubs that it fits underneath. And this should move back and forth. It should be springy like that, that's normal. But you should not be able to pull it and pop it out of there. If you can pop it out, that C-clip is not in the right spot. So let's go ahead and put our bolts back together, slide together, and screw it on. Once we've got this screwed together, we can go ahead and line this up. Now it is possible to put this in upside down. Okay, if you take this all apart and this drops out, then if you can flip it upside down and put it in the wrong way. So the bottom is this part that is flush right here. So see how this is flush along the bottom here? This side has a step right here. The step is the top. The step should have the threaded side up here. So we can thread it together like that. So that when we push down on it, it pops out like that. Now we can slide that in, snap it down. Last thing we want to do is put our grips back on. Always start with the back because you have to. There's no other way to do it. Put our console screw back in. With a tightening. Take our front grips, put them over, make sure that they all snap in place. And then as we tighten these down, just snug, it'll move this bottom section so that it aligns properly. When you first lay it down on top of there, it looks kind of like there's giant gaps or they don't fit quite right. But once you put this down in there, it'll move it all into the right spot so it looks nice. All right, and then we will put our barrel back on. So there you have it. That's overall maintenance for a CS1 or CS1.5.